have the servers, why don't we do the new things in Azure? And that really makes sense. And one of the examples, oh yeah, I'll start over with that. That's one of the examples how this presentation now is different. So, I'm just setting the stage. Swatch Group is very diverse in some ways. Yes, it's most of it is about watches, but there's watches, you know, for 200,000, 300,000 price range, to down to $50, $85. So it's the business and the customers that we're talking to are very, very different. And then there's the mid-level that goes from 500 to 1,200 and so on. And that's on one hand the brands, but we also have the whole production, where we're really still people who have metal. We order metal and we transform the metal into pieces. You don't have that much anymore within Switzerland. So the IT organization as a consequence is very diverse because we pretty much have to cover all the needs. So from the store on Fifth Avenue, New York City, to the tiniest little screw that you can barely see with your own eyes, we're very vertically integrated. We're very atypical. Typically, companies kind of look for a horizontal slice and then they outsource the rest, or they buy in and then they resell. We're very, very vertically integrated. That makes IT quite special. So we're an accumulation of small businesses to medium-sized businesses. We're not just, even though we have 37,000 employees within the group, we have lots of small units. I mean, some units can have 3, 4 people, some units have 2,500 people, but it's really small units overall. As a consequence, policies, are we being recorded? Policies are a mess. If you can take that off the record. Very good, very good. So there's not a clear policy. So for instance, if you go look at our InfoSec people's website, it clearly says privately owned system. Where is it? Cloud services is strictly forbidden, but we have official services that are running on the cloud. So there's inconsistency. Let's put it that way. So it doesn't necessarily make it easier. Our challenge is, in some ways, to think in terms of the whole corporation, what makes sense for the whole company, and then think about the different aspects, the geographic aspects, the technical aspects, but also the governance aspects, obviously. And then our role is also to come up with a proposal towards InfoSecurity and tell them, hey, this is how we would do it. Are you okay with that? And that's where I lead over to Valerie.
Thank you, Peter.
To continue. Thank you.
Just a note. Can you stand close, maybe on this side?
You want me to stand here? Okay, I will try also to speak loudly. Okay. So, quick introduction. So, we are being asked to talk about governance over Azure. So, governance, we can talk about it, I think, during days. So, I will try to sum up, and I will try to focus on what I think made sense and what you should think about if you start the journey to Azure, or if you have already started, maybe some highlighting that we discovered and that we should take in account. Don't hesitate also to ask questions if or just say I do not agree with you, because you know it happens. So to continue the introduction, what does it mean? In fact, as Peter said, we have different production companies, we have different brands, different variation of cost and quality. We have timing service also. You have maybe seen that if you look at cycling or if you look at skiing, the fees ask some of our brands to do the timing. So we have also this kind of services that are being there. So if you look at that, we have some brands or some companies within the Swatch Group that have no clue about cloud, and some are already, thinking ahead and saying, how can I onboard on artificial intelligence? So that means, in fact, that when you discuss with your customers, you have kind of a lot of diversity in terms of cloud maturity. So what does it mean for us? In fact, we have the same challenge than you, kind of. The biggest challenge for us is the process unification, because when you have I would say maturity, big difference in terms of maturity. How do you onboard people that are not mature, and how do you help them to onboard? Of course, as we have various brands, we have challenge in terms of authentication and authorization, because I think you may understand that Flick-Flack have other needs in terms of security than maybe luxurious brands, at least as expectation. Of course, we need to keep cost across all the brands under controls. When you do governance, you want to see how compliant you are, etc., etc. Keep operation complexity low, because as Peter said, we are horizontally organized, so that means that at one point I will need to onboard operation within our solution, so that means that I will need to train those people if I want them to be ready to operate in a few weeks. I don't need to come up with a solution that would not make sense and be very complex, and of course you need to put in place secure solution. And you need to be agile, because it's what we all need to be. So in terms of governance, you need to think first on the way you want to organize your enterprise environment, meaning the way you organize your accounts within Azure. There are different approaches, and this is really important in my opinion, because it has some impact. We will tackle that. Cost management and analysis, how do you handle that if you have multiple customers, multiple projects, and how you can maybe differentiate and say to your guys, to project 1, it costs this amount of money, your infrastructure, and to the project 2, it costs this amount, and differentiate. How you can do solution engineering, so it's where I came up with a lot of ideas in terms of the way we can automatize some stuff. Policies, auditing, and best practice. This is more documentation, but you will see that policies can be also integrated in Azure, and it can be helpful. And we will finish with security and data. The last point, monitoring, log management, and operation. I won't tackle it because I think it depends on the way you are organized. And I need to say, I'm not there. So this, I would say, it depends really on the way you get organized. And monitoring and log management, in fact, everything is already part of Azure. There are a lot of good documentation, so I don't have a lot of recommendation on this front so far. Okay, let's start with the Azure Enterprise environment. Are you all already using Azure, or are you planning to use it? Yes, okay. So maybe I open doors there, but to me it's critical to come up with the correct structure, because it has some impact in terms of authorization, of course. So the way you will manage the people getting to the subscription and how they will manage them. Cost management, because of course you know that Microsoft do a lot of costs based on subscription, so how can you manage that differently maybe? The number of resources you're able to provision. If you have a single subscription under your enterprise environment, you have limitation. If you have a lot, then you have more resources available. And operation workload, because if you have a lot of subscriptions, maybe you need a lot of people to manage, and you have a lot of operation to do to give the authorizations. So those are the Microsoft recommendations. So you can get organized based on geographic. If you are, let's say, an insurance company and you have different kind of solutions for US, Europe, Asia, etc., it can make sense to have this kind of organization. You can focus on business division. If you are Airbus, let's say, and you have, you know, the airplanes and other technologies and so on, maybe business division can make sense. And the functional for brands or for companies that are more like IT companies providing software, they need finance, they need IT, they need development, and maybe this can make sense to have this kind of organizations. So that's really what Microsoft recommends. And there we are not, I would say, fully decided on the way we want to do, because we have a couple of challenge to finalize there, but this is a hierarchy we are thinking about, meaning, as you have understood, as Swatch Group services, we will need to manage, I would say, up to the level of the accounts. Then the subscription, what we decided so far, in order to provide the service, is to have a subscription at least per environment, saying, okay, this is for testing purpose, okay, we can throw it away and that's it. And then we have the subscription core, prod, and dev, and potentially also staging. And under that, you will have the resource group, and the resource group will be where we will differentiate the authorization. So that means that if, let's say, Omega needs a resource group to do something, he will have the access there, where maybe TISO will have another resource group and we can make the authorization. So what is good with that is that it's easy to maintain because, of course, you have less subscription. Cool. But on the other side, and you have the full control over the subscription, so that means that I am the owner, I'm the only one, and I can do whatever I want, and nobody can discuss whatever, you know, and you manage fully, so that's great. On the other side, you have some limitations because, you know, for a resource group, you cannot create as many resources as you want, and on the subscriptions, you cannot create also as many resources as you want. So that means that this model, we may reach a certain limit, so we need to see, in fact, how we will onboard projects. Another thing that, you know, kind of annoys me, if you have a big project, let's say, I don't know which kind of project we could have, maybe, you know, a big project that would make sense for brands to focus on the cloud, and that would be really a project dedicated to customers and that would need a lot of infrastructure. It doesn't make sense to have a resource group. We will certainly need to think about having a subscription or even go upper. So this, I would say, is the kind of structure that is very good for, I would say, cross brands, cross company, cross teams with small projects. If you come up with, I would say, bigger projects and really worldwide project where you need to start to have something in the US, in Asia, in Europe, because you're focused on worldwide solution, maybe this solution is not so good and you should come back to a solution that is more Microsoft. And I'm sure that we can do, we can use both. So it's the reason why it's still under evaluation. It's because we are still discussing with brands to see how they want to consume Azure services.
Have you considered using management groups as well?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
We will. The thing is that if I add the management groups there, we will discuss the whole hour about this point. No, but yes, yeah. We look at management group, especially to be able to, and it will resonate really about the governance policies, because you can apply policies across management group, and it makes totally sense to do that. Okay. Let's see a bit how we can manage costs. So, as you have understood, we have different brands, different customers, so that means that I will need to provide different bills. If I have Omega and TISO, I need to be able to differentiate them and say, you consume this amount of resource, and you consume this amount of resource. So, as I mentioned, you can do it maybe with subscriptions, because by this way, whatever is under the subscription, you can see the cost per month, that's fine. But it's not what we're gonna do, and I don't, I see some limitation with that, and you will see why. So, the challenge, in fact, you have is that if you look at the billing default, the segmentation is done via subscription, actually, within Azure. By default, you can see, you go under your subscription, and you see how much you need to pay for it. And honestly, I don't know for you, but for me, you don't see a lot of, there is not a lot of functionalities to do really analytics. That means that you can see the cost, you can see the resource, but if you want to start to really dig in to see which kind of application and which kind of brands and which kind of blah blah, etc., the environment and so on, how much they cost, you will start to be tricky to do it. And as I mentioned, how do I cross-charge? The overall idea, and I don't know if it's a standard in Azure, but it's a standard in AWS, is to come up with adding tags to resource. So you add tags to your resource in order to differentiate them. Sorry. So that means that you need a tagging governance, but there are some limitations. So some Azure resource don't support or propagate tags. I don't know how many of you have implemented an EKS service. Okay. Okay. Did you see that when you provision an AKS service, the tags are linked on your AKS, but when you look at the costs linked to your clients, there is no tags at all? So kind of you instantiate the Linux machine to host your containers, and the Linux machine are part of a resource group that has been automatically created by Microsoft, and they don't propagate tags. So that means that the costs that are linked to those machines, how do I do? I don't, I will need to find a way. But there is a miss from Microsoft. Another point is that you have some limitation in terms of number of tags. So that means that you have 15 tags per resource, and the value is limited in terms of length. So what I came up with, and this is really part of what I have done in the past, is to categorize the tags per 4 categories. You have the business tags, the technical tags, automation tags, security tags. Business tags, okay, it identify which kind of cost center you have, maybe company if you need, or department, or whatever you think that is relevant to your company structure. And you can add a name, which is for me very important. Because in general, when you provision resource, you have naming convention to name your resource within the Azure. But when you look concretely at your virtual network, for example, which is called VN, the name of the region, the name of the, I don't know, project, department, etc., with shortcut, and you don't understand clearly what it is. So adding a tag which makes sense in terms of business can be helpful, and this is a suggestion that I would do. Another one that is very interesting, at least when you have a lot of environments and you have a lot of region, is the application ID. Because if you are able at one point to do cost analysis on tags, then having the application ID allow you to see what is the impact in terms of cost of your application across all your subscription, all your region, all your environment, which start to make sense when you have really big infrastructure. Environment as you want. The owner could be helpful to put an email or a group email or something. By this way, if you have policies automation and you see that when you have a resource that is not respecting the policy, you can have directly an email of the people that are owning this resource. It can help you to say, hey guys, take a look at that, you're not respecting this kind of stuff. If you don't have this information, then you need to find out, from the subscription and everything, who it is. Automation tags. This really depends on the way and the strategy you want to do it, but it can be helpful. For example, lifetime. If you are able to implement automation to destroy resource in dev environment, when you do, for example, a proof of concept, the people says, okay, we do the proof of concept on the 1st of April, it's over. Then you can put potentially a date there, and you can implement serverless functions to destroy automatically your resource if they are part of this kind of environment and blah, blah, and so on. Of course, you don't use that in production, but can be helpful to reduce cost, because in general, what we do is that we provision resource, we do whatever, we play, and then the guys go on weekend, and you pay for all the weekend. That's really cool. And potentially having this date to destroy at the end can be helpful. Also, if you want to put automation to be able to start your VM and stop your VM because your business starts at 6 a.m. in the morning, finished at 10 p.m. and during the weekend nobody connects, could be helpful to be able to do that. And also the security tag, this can be helpful if you want to have in your solution some compliance. If, for example, you say, okay, this solution needs to be GDPR, by this way you can directly extract which kind of resource needs to respect your this kind of compliance, could be helpful. Encryption, if you want to do some analytics on your storage or database to make sure that everything is encrypted, can be also helpful. It really depends on the way you want to get organized. But these are examples, I would say. So, tag your resource in order to categorize them. Use tag inheritance. You can in Azure, and that's, I would say, it can be convenient or it can be a bit tricky. On the resource group, you can say, okay, I apply the same tags on all the resource. And you can have this kind of policy saying, okay, I have the tags on my resource group and I propagate them on all the resource created within this resource group. That can be helpful, kind of also dangerous, it depends on the way you want to do it. One thing that can be helpful also is to use JSON format to store more if needed. So as you have 15 tags limitation, for example, to me, automation tags, this will be only one tag, and I will put a JSON format key value to be able to extract that. Just make sure that you end up not more than 256 chars. And then you can start to do cost analytics. You can have cost analytics for opportunities based on the business tags or technical tags, depending on what you want to do. So you can create dashboard for your dev environment, for your stage environments based on that. For analytics, what I have evaluated so far, I don't know if you are using one of those options, but the standard is Azure cost management and billing and clouding. Did you test them? Those are the standards, so it's a default solution. Okay, it creates standard reports, but kind of tricky to really extract all the analytics. So that means that all the things that I explained to you with the tags can be tricky to build those reports, and to me, it's not easy to customize. Another option that you can explore is to use, in fact, the APIs and develop your own solution. There are different opportunities. You can use potentially Prometheus and Grafana in order to push the data and come up with dashboards. You have the full control, but this needs to be maintained and operated. And also, you have an Azure API dependency can be an issue. Up to you to define yes, no. And you need cross control. I have tested that in order to see how I can do, Excel extraction and so on. Honestly, to be able to understand which kind of rates I need to find depending on my subscription, my blah blah and so on, was kind of a nightmare. At the beginning, I had end up with not the same results, and at the end neither. So, anyway. You can use Power BI. I don't know if you have seen, but with Power BI you have now consumption insight that is free. It's a kind of application you can enable in Power BI when you have an Azure account. Can be helpful. Honestly, I just tested it today. It's really convenient in terms of reports, so you have more reports than with the standard approach, so I recommend to have a look at it because it's free. The thing is that to me it doesn't meet my needs. I will need to customize, so I will need to create reports based on the Power BI solution, so that means I need to evaluate the cost behind. You have also third-party solution. At my previous jobs we were using Cloudability. Really convenient, but that means that each time you have a new subscription, you need to reference it and integrate it, and that means also that you have costs that are increased, and you need to create dashboards. What is the best solution? Take a look, but those are the solutions I would say that are interesting. Honestly, Azure cost management, billing, and clouding, to me, it's not enough, but that's for me. Okay, so solution engineering. Who knows what is infrastructure as a code? Okay, cool. CI/CD? Okay, so kind of a reminder for almost everybody. It's a method. Infrastructure as a code allow you to deploy, to define templates that will allow you to provision, in fact, the resource on public cloud. Okay, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery or deployment. I don't want to debate here what is the difference, but there is one. And I came up with, I would say, a very high-level definition, kind of summarize and want to enter the debate. But in fact, CI allow you to say, okay, I have a source code repository where I push my templates and potentially the source code of the solution that I develop. And when there is a push on a branch, on the master branch at least, you have a process that is starting to test that everything is fine. And then the deployment means that when you push, you go through the deployment process, and then deployment means there that you go up to the production without human intervention. So is it what we're gonna do? I don't think so, but I would love to be able to do it, but you know, the reality, we are not Google. Let's say it like this. So I put some logos. We are using Terraform. We will use TFS, but with GitHub project for the source code repository. Then for the continuous integration, continuous deployment, I put Azure DevOps, but it can be other things. You know, the pipeline you're using doesn't matter. It's a concept that is important. In terms of opportunities, what I like with Terraform is that it's written in HCL. HCL is the HashiCorp. Fuck, I forgot the C. Thank you. Configuration, yes, that's right. It's an HashiCorp proprietary language, which is very inconvenient, lighter than JSON, better than YAML to me. What is very interesting is that you automate your provisioning, but as you know already, you know, infrastructure as a code, I'm sure that I'm open doors there. It increases agility and improve risk management. And why Terraform? So I had a session and some people were there 2 weeks ago. For me, in fact, what is interesting with Terraform is that you have different providers. So that means that if you want to provision, if you want to be multi-cloud, you can use the same pipeline in order to provision resource on Azure or on AWS. Be careful, that doesn't mean that you use the same templates. You're using the same pipeline, make the difference. And you can have also different other solutions that can be integrated in your pipeline, such as there are some vSphere, VMware vSphere provider, you can have Nutanix provider, you can have different, so you can provision resource in different solutions using the same pipeline as the same approach, which is, in my opinion, convenient. So having a source code repository, for me, it's very important because you can version your infrastructure. So that means that if you need to deploy even a third-party solution, let's say, you know, an Atlassian Jira or whatever, maybe changing a major version would need that you align the infrastructure behind. And if it is the case, then you can say, okay, this was the version I was using for version 4, and this is a version of the infrastructure of the version 5, and you can see the difference. And if you need to provision back or whatever, you can evaluate. So using a source code repository is for me very interesting. And what I recommend, but I come from development side, as Peter mentioned, is to have the documentation within the code. This way, the documentation will follow the version of your infrastructure. So don't document somewhere else. Document directly within your code using Markdown, using whatever. But by this way, you need to update your documentation when you do updates on your code. By this way, you don't forget. It's not somewhere else. And for the CI/CD pipeline, okay, you can do release process, testing, environment provisioning. That's really cool. But what is very interesting to me and what is a game changer potentially is that you can say, okay, the automation allows you to create and provision whatever you want, and the people that are operating can only access to see. And by this way, you can say, okay, the automation are the owner and the user are the reader. So that means that nobody can come and say, you know, click, delete my VM. This is done by automation with the standard process, and that's something in terms of security that could be interesting.
Are you using some sort of configuration management tool, like Ansible, Hopper?
So we will need at one point potentially, but today I would say the focus is to be able to provision infrastructure because it's what we are being asked to do, and this would be the next level. There are different things that we are looking at, but so far I just reading a bit about it. I was not using a configuration management before, but we evaluate. So Puppet is a standard, I would say, today. Ansible is well integrated in Azure, and Salt seems to be promising. That's what I would say went through so far. That's the three that I will have a look at. Okay, policy auditing, best practice, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. What are the challenges from governance? Again, I'm coming from dev. Governance, as always, is me off. That's for sure. Because it's against agility, it's against innovation. The people are always, please follow the governance, blah, blah, etc. So how will, as I now have the hat of saying, okay, this is the way you want to use it, how do I do in order to have, to provide something that is not, I would say, making this kind of behavior for my customer? And I mean, how many of you have governance in their company? Almost everybody, right? How many of you are able to tell me now, my project has this level of governance? Okay, thanks. So the overall idea of that is to say, okay, the policies we create, we can potentially use, we can describe them using Terraform. So we can provision, create, or at least, if you use a built-in policy from Azure, you can associate and create policies and associate those policies to resource group and subscription. And you can use your automation to do that in order to apply that. To apply those policies under your subscription and resource group. And you can define audit policies or deny policies. So let's take an example. You say, okay, my VM, my virtual networks that is connected to my on-premise network, I don't want anybody to create a public IP on a network interface. This is a kind of policies you can set, and then you can say, okay, for all the subscriptions that are connected to our on-premise network, this is not allowed. Or you can say also it's not allowed, but except for this user. And you can start, to fine-tune and know exactly what you want to do. This is the kind of policies, I would say, that are operational. There are also governance policies like naming convention, etc., etc. So you can say, okay, some will be audit effects, some will be denied effects, and some will be audit effect for your dev and sandbox environments, and some will be deny effect for stage and prod. You can really fine-tune on the way you want to do it. What is interesting for that? Yes?
Right. Can you quickly elaborate why you would use audit in your dev and sandbox environment?
Yes.
Is there a specific goal for that?
Yes. If you look at the you can for example say, okay, naming convention is tagging convention needs to be followed. For example, you say, okay, the tag of the cost, it will be mandatory, and you don't want to audit, then you say deny everywhere. But maybe you will say application ID, I don't need when I'm in dev and sandbox, where when I'm stage and prod, I need it. So I audit.
You take several actions if you have non-compliant resources?
If it's denied, that means that when the person tries to provision, it will fail. So you are rejected. So the good thing with the audit in at least dev and sandbox, when the developer starts in fact to provision, you can say, okay, they can come up to you as a service manager and say, okay, I have now provisioned something and I want to go to staging. You can quickly have a look and say, look, those are the things that you need to change before going there. And that could be interesting because by this way you can show him how compliant he is and which kind of effort he needs to do in order to move to stage and prod. So will I have a lot of tags that will be in this case? I don't think so. It will really depend on the way we want to structure some stuff. I will come up with the network later, but it's mainly around network security group, application security group, and all this stuff that I may do audits at the beginning, and so it's mainly around security and governance security that I may have this differentiation, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
So you do not trigger any actions, just pure auditing.
Pure auditing for now. We will see what we can do. I'm alone. So I need to focus. The cool thing, in my opinion, with this approach is that the governance compliance is visible at the early stage of the product. So that means that the project. So as we just discussed, in dev, when you want to move, you can show the level of compliance. The documentation is up to date because when you document your policies and you push them into the repository, you have your documentation links, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure you're convinced. When this is something that I used in my previous job. Did you remember 3 years ago, 3 years ago, we had the OpenSSL big issue. We wake up one morning and somebody said, oh, I find a way to hack OpenSSL. Okay. And then you have the big boss that comes and say, how much we are impacted? And you say, oh, fuck, how do I do now to answer this question? That's kind of a tricky one. And I don't know if you can do it with this example, but let's say you have this kind of situation and you are able to create a policy and apply it as an audit mode directly on all your subscription, you can potentially know exactly what is the level of impact you have, first thing. And as you have a tag owner with a group for each resource with an address email to know who you to contact when there is an issue, the ones that are not compliant, you can send emails automatically to say, okay guys, you need to look at that, you're exposed. So it can be interesting. So that means that you can improve the way you manage your risks. So it increases also visibility. I'm sure you have already seen this kind of graph, and at least for visibility it's already good, and you can potentially answer the question, do you have policies? Yes. Can you say how much compliant you are? Yes. So the limitation is only for Microsoft Azure, my solution. So kind of cool for Microsoft Azure, but people are coming and saying, oh, I would like to go to AWS for artificial intelligence. You're stuck. It's not multi-cloud, so is it an issue? You need just to think about it. Is it something that you want to do only for Azure, or do you have other solutions? So if it is the case, you can evaluate, and it's what I'm trying to evaluate actually. It's DB Cloud. DB Cloud, in fact, it allows you to define all your policies, and it will grab, in fact, all the resource within a database that is hosted by you. DB Cloud is a solution that you operate, but you pay per number of resources you evaluate. It allows you to create the policies you want, and it allows you to use built-in policies. And those built-in policies are very interesting because if you need to be compliant, like GDPR, SOC 2, or whatever, they have a lot of policies that are already done. So that means that if you need solutions that need to be compliant to those kind of things, you can potentially with those solutions make sure and see how far away you are in terms of compliance.
Have you maybe looked at the cloud custodian as well?
Cloud?
It's cloud custodian. It comes from the AWS world.
Yeah.
It brings some functionality for Azure.
Yeah. I didn't look at it. No. I looked at DB Cloud for different reasons because I heard it in my previous job, because I know that they are using, if you go on the DB Cloud website, you will see directly where I worked before, because they are the one that are, and also because our boss knows somebody there that contact, and the boss said you should look at it, and I need to say not so bad, but I will look at it, and I will look also at other tools, but honestly DB Cloud seems to be interesting for me, at least for my purpose, for what I explained. So network. What we want to do for now, because we don't have a lot of customers, that's not true. We are not planning to take our data center and push everything to Azure, so that means that we don't need, or at least half of the solution. So that means that the connection between our data center so far to the VNet on Azure is not critical for now. So what we did so far is a site-to-site VPN connection, but of course, depending on the traffic we'll have, we will certainly evaluate an express routes quickly. What we plan to do is to have a VNet core The VNet core for me is important because we talked about automation, for example. If I want to be able to shut down, if I want to be able to destroy resource, if I want to be able to do auditing, whatever, I will use serverless functions. And if it is the case, everything will be connected there. If I need, any VM or whatever, this will be the core to operate everything. Then we will have VNet staging dev and prod, and we will have other VNet. Each VNet has his own security group, etc. The rules. You see now the audit policies and the strict policies. I put also the VNet dev with the peering under strict policies because, if we have a connection to our data center, I don't want to be fired because I have something wrong there. So if it is connected, then I don't want people to put a public IP there with saying, okay, come up guys, I'm the jump for all the world. And we will, for the audit, we will have the dev and the sandbox, outside without any connections. The solution will be deployed on peered VNets. They need to justify, in fact, why they need a connection, because there are solutions that needs potentially to interface with that, with our data center, but there are maybe some that doesn't need. So if it doesn't need, why I would put it here or here with a peering? I don't need it. No public IP for solution. Use hardened jump host for management if needed. So that means that if you want to manage some stuff there, have a jumped host and use hardened image. Those images are more secure than if you take standard image. They have been prepared for this kind of behavior. Yeah, there is plenty of documentation on how you should secure your stuff on Microsoft documentation. I really recommend to consider that if you need to do it. And the segmentation, so that means that how do I differentiate, I would say, two solutions? It will be done. So with a single network security group, I still need to make sure that I'm able to do that because I just explored that so far. And then I will do application. So I will block everything, and what will be allowed will be done via application security group. So that means that you tag your resource saying I belong to this application, and the application is allowed to discuss with this port on this protocol across all the resource. That would be the approach that I go for. I still need to make sure that we can do it. So far I didn't discuss about data, and why? Because I think everybody needs to think the way he want to manage his data, and I just want to come with thinking more than strict governance. Also because Peter said, we are not allowed to go to the cloud, but we are doing it. So the data is a bit the same at Stretch Group. I need to come up with a suggestion, but still I don't know where to put exactly the cursor. But those are the points I keep in mind in order to come and set the cursor. The first thing, data categorization. I'm sure that you're all aware. Try to identify which data are under certification, which one are the ones that are business critical for your business. Again, I think that I open doors. Whatever you put on your public cloud, encrypt it. Why? If you store something database or storage with data on it, why should you encrypt it? Because if, let's say, you're not concerned by the court, but somebody else is, another solution, another customer is, and the court say, okay, Microsoft, you need to give us all the hard drive for this solution, which is not yours. You're not concerned at all. The Microsoft needs to be able to take all the hard drive and give them to the court. For the solution concerned, they will say, okay, it's encrypted, we need the different certificates, and Microsoft will give, or the solution owner will need to give his certificate. If you don't have the encrypted data, if you don't encrypt your data, then the hard drives that are in the court have your data not encrypted. You're not concerned by that, but they are there. If you're encrypted, then the court don't have your certificate and they cannot see your data. So you should always encrypt. It's coming from my previous job. It's an American company, and it's the reason we encrypted everything. Except also about certification. But this is really the aim of certification, of the encryption.
Are you using your own keys, or did you evaluate these scenarios?
Honestly, I didn't do any decision so far on these fronts. If you own your own keys, what do you do? At one point, you will need to set in a key vault your certificate to be able to use it. So you use your own key, but it's in a key vault from Microsoft.
Yeah.
So, okay, I will certainly consider to continue to use our keys, but more because we have a standard to generate the certificate rather than saying, okay, it's because I want to own the keys. That would be my, where I was working before. We were saying, okay, we trust the cloud provider. It was AWS. You provide the certificate, that's fine. Because also the certification that are behind in terms of encryption, they need to follow guidance on these fronts to be able to continue to be certificate. So they can produce certificate, give it to you, but they cannot keep it by certifications. Also, think about provider certification. Actually, we have a good debate, and it's a good example, in fact, Swan Group, because it's a Swiss company. So Swiss company, I'm a Swiss, so I'm a Swiss. I know my data, and my data are safe in my data center. So they are sure that their data are safer in their data center. But when you talk about certification, you say, okay, on Azure, there is this amount of certification. How much are we certified at Swatch? 30, yes, we should. Okay, so where are your data most secure? I don't say anything else, just think about it. But I can tell you, my previous company went to cloud and shut down their data center for solutions because of certification. It would have been too many investment to be able to be certified with our own data center to operate our own solution instead of going to the cloud. So they went to the cloud because of it. And they are paying a lot of money. The contract. So read the contract and identify where you would stand if there is an issue in the court. Are you in the US? Are you in Europe? Where in Europe? Think also about the region policies. If you put your data in US, is it a good stuff? China, where, there are maybe some consideration there. So that means that for us, for example, today we are on the Europe region, and if we need to go across around the world with all the solutions, we will identify clearly which kind of solution will stand around the world and how, in fact, in terms of data, where we can have some risk and how we handle it. But that needs to be done by design.
Do you see an advantage of the Swiss Azure data centers in terms of
Technical?
whatever data you have?
The thing is that, in terms of Azure, if you have a European contract, if I'm right, you will correct me, Peter, if I'm wrong, but if I'm right, you will be in Europe for the course, somewhere in the north. So, even if you have your data in Switzerland, certainly that if you have something wrong happening, it will be in Europe that you will be standing in the courts. So do I see any advantage? The only thing that they guarantee so far with the discussion we had with Microsoft is that as you are in Switzerland and the data center are in Switzerland, you will go straight away and you will stay in Switzerland with your data. Okay, cool. So is it marketing or is it really helpful? I would say both. Marketing, because by this way you're sure that it stays in Switzerland, but against the court I think it doesn't matter at all. And it's also safer because you're sure that it doesn't go to the US. That's, I would say, for me. But going to West Europe, I don't see any reason of any change. The other point you have certainly seen in the newspaper that UBS has a big contract now with Microsoft to have to operate their infrastructure. Is it something that will change something? Yes, for me at least, because when I would say big boss of Swatch will come and say cloud is not safe, I would say where do you have your money? UBS, okay, cool, UBS is there. What do we do? You know, kind of in terms of communication, it can help me. It may be a game changer in terms of the way we adopt cloud in Switzerland, because this has certainly an impact on the people that are still concerned by the cloud. Now a bank is moving. Come on, guys. The safer, what we are proud of, and so on in Switzerland. So this, in my opinion, is a game changer, and it's a game changer for Microsoft. And so far, I would say not for Google and AWS. AWS, honestly, they do really well in terms of services, but they don't give a shit about Switzerland. Think about it. Amazon.ch. Do you have it? No. Are we an interesting market? No. They don't give a shit about us. They just want to have a Zurich office to, use our brains. But, making money here, honestly, we're not so big, so they don't give any attention about our market. Google, it's a bit different. Google, they are trying to invest more and more to open Google Cloud in Switzerland. But Azure is really going into this direction, and they are doing a lot of stuff for UBS, I would say. We had a good discussion, and I came up with a lot of points. If you take, for example, database, in Azure, one thing that annoys me is that the connection, the DNS connection, the URL that you're using is public. Come on, guys. If I come back, I don't want it public, I want it here. And I want to access it through this path. Can I make it? Yes, you can. You go on the database and you say which kind of IPs you're allowed to. No, I don't want to do that. I want to attach here. This is not done so far, but I got from the Microsoft account that is in the loop for the Swiss data center, that they are working on that for UBS, because UBS had the same kind of query. So they are going in the right direction and right path for this kind of stuff. And I think that's it for, I would say, the overall governance journey of what I wanted to highlight. I don't know if you have any question, remarks, if you totally agree, totally disagree, if I'm far away from the reality. No? Okay.
Maybe one question. Are you also looking into Azure blueprints for deployment of resource pools and subscriptions, or is that, are you planning to do this more with the Terraform way?
The thing is that Terraform could be well adopted because of the multiple providers within Swatch Group, where Blueprint would be only focused on Azure. So
it's the same like with policies.
Exactly, it's exactly the same. So, I find the approach of Blueprint interesting. I think that it does totally make sense to go in this direction. Maybe one comment about, for example, ARM or CloudFormation. If you look at AWS, or what is the difference between ARM, CloudFormation, and Terraform? ARM and CloudFormation allows you to provision solutions, but when you need to reference something that is existing, if we just go back there, you want to create a VM that is in this VNet. the way you will do it is to pass the ID of the VNets there. So that means that you need to copy and paste the long URL or whatever to identify the VNets. Where in Terraform, you can, in your script, say, I have a data, and the data is something, a resource already existing. So in fact, instead of having during the execution the error, when you try to provision, Terraform, it's when you plan that it looks and synchronized, and if the data doesn't exist, you may have an issue at the beginning. So, in fact, and you can potentially have a good advantage, because if you have, for example, reference on IPs, let's say you have a reference on a virtual machine or whatever, or whatever. Like, for example, the endpoint connection here. I can, instead of setting the IP, sets the resource automatically. So that's very interesting too. Terraform is kind of a game changer there. So that means that you grab more information and you have all the parameters of the data you just get. So if Blueprint allows that, then I would consider totally Blueprint. But as a developer, and as I have done a lot of templates in my previous job without this opportunity, I did CloudFormation and I did Terraform. But when I started Terraform, honestly, I was nearly rewriting what I had in CloudFormation due to that, because of operation.
We've discussed blueprints not in the context of Azure, but in the context of electronics. And it was, for half a year, it was a huge fight. I was absolutely strictly against it, just because if you have one application that you deploy 1,000 times, it's fantastic, it's great. We just have the opposite. We deploy 1,000 applications once. And for that, it's the effort of maintaining the blueprints, building the blueprints, maintaining them. It's just
in Terraform, you can potentially create modules, and that's something interesting. You can set, for example, let's say you can define the way you wanna. We talked about governance. You can add automatically all the tags. You can say, okay, I want to have this kind of reference, this kind of structure, this kind of, and by this way, your Terraform templates can be in line with your governance. And if, in fact, the people that needs to provision the resource can directly reference the module, it's easier for them. They can say, okay, I need a VM, I need a DB, and I need a connection in between. I have two modules and set them within my Terraform, and I launch it. And I don't know if Blueprint allows this kind of approach. I didn't look at it deeply enough, I would say, to really say, yes, it answers my needs. But at least Terraform does. So. Thank you.
Just
Yeah.
one more question. I mean, Terraform is a great tool, I love it, but it has, when it comes to Azure, it has lots of limitations. So you're very limited when it comes to, like, let's say, the detailed configuration of resources. How do you somehow overcome those limitations?
So it depends really on the resource. If you look at, for example, AKS, one of the limitations you may have is to say, okay, I want to deploy something using Terraform to deploy containers on it, and you may end up with tricky stuff due to the annotation. If you want your load balancer not being exposed, for example, it's one of the limitations I reach. For that, I will directly use AKS solution and CLI to do it. For other stuff, it really depends. So far, I would say all the solutions that we explore are not limited at all. So that means that we are fine so far, and how to say, I'm a guy who doesn't want to solve problems I don't have. So
that's a good
so far I didn't have it, but I will certainly reach a level where I may end up with an issue. The limitation is also done due to the fact that the maturity of the provider is still under development, and what I have so far is that the provider is heavily developed by Microsoft. Actually, they have a strong they are willing to use Terraform, And in fact, that's very interesting because I have some people that are asking me from Microsoft, how do you use it? How do you plan to do it? And I'm in touch with them in order to give kind of feedback on how, as a customer, I want to use Terraform with Azure. So I can see a trend where they want to use really Terraform. I'm not saying that it will be just without any issue, but I feel that it will be mature at least end of the year. I hope so. We are really waiting the next release, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.